Hey, John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy. Thank you so much for joining me for another live stream with Global Real Estate School. Don't forget, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, be sure and do that as well. Well, I have some new digital flashcards. That's right. All of my students will have the ability to use the digital flashcards. And the really cool thing is they look awesome on a mobile phone. So I'll show you kind of what that looks like here. You can take these right on a mobile phone if you'd like and go through those, or you can take them on a mobile tablet device if you'd like to do that. So really a cool looking program. So we're going to use the computer version here, and I'm going to get started. We're going to be talking about agency. Now, these are brand new. As we go through these, I may look at them and say, you know what, I need to probably change that a little bit. But the really cool thing about the flashcards, I have these broken down by categories, is that wherever you are, pull these things out and study your material wherever you are, okay? Because they actually look super on a mobile phone. So there you go, right there. Well, let's go through some of the agency flashcards and see how much you know. So, how does the responsibility differ for agents versus non-agents? Well, you just flip the card around and you can see that agents owe what? Agents owe fiduciary duties. Non-agents are really like facilitators. Now, in Missouri and many other states, if you are a non-agent, we refer to that as a transactional broker. But understand, if you are going to be an agent, you have a written agreement to work on behalf of the client, and so you would be considered really more of a transactional broker or a facilitator. So again, flashcards work really well like that. And so you just would take your finger, if you're on a mobile device, and slide it up so that you can see more information. Or if you're on your computer, just use your mouse. What is dual agency and designated agency, and why are they tricky? Well, a dual agency, it's the same firm or agent represents both sides. With designated agency, the firm actually assigns separate agents to each side. Now, this can conflict with loyalty and confidentiality. And I want to go to the board and actually draw this out so you kind of get an idea of how this works. When you have, now I had to go through this with Mayfield Real Estate because what I was finding is that, and I'm just going to use one of my agents here, and we'll just say this is Mary, okay? I had a Mary who worked for me, and I'm not talking, referring to that Mary, but I'm just using that name. And Mary is an agent, and she's going to work for John and Carrie. So I'm going to just put J and K for my name and my wife's name. Now, we are the clients. Everybody kind of have that, hopefully, and can understand that. So if we're the clients with Mary, who's the agent, we probably had to sign a buyer's agency agreement, right? And that creates, I'm going to put buyer's agency contract. That creates this thing that we know and we've learned in class called COALD, cold, care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. Now, let's just say we have a person who works in the office named Paul. And Paul lists, so he goes out and lists a house with Tom. So in this case, Tom is the seller. Now, if I need to kind of make these smaller, I can do that. So that's kind of the cool thing there. So Tom's a seller. Now, when Paul signs the listing contract, what did that create? Well, it created an agency relationship, COALD. Now, here's the complication. In this example, Mary and Paul work for Mayfield Real Estate. In other words, they're both on the same team. Mary and Paul are under one umbrella, Mayfield Real Estate Inc. And so Mayfield Real Estate Inc. is the broker, right? We know that the company has to have a broker's license, and then we also know there's a designated broker in this case, okay? But both of these agreements are between who? They're between Mayfield Real Estate Inc. and the client, Tom and John and Carrie. That's an exam question, and you need to make sure that you understand that, because they're going to ask you questions and they want to try to pull you in and make you think, well, that listing contract's really Mary's because she got the buyers and Paul got the seller, Tom. No, remember, you're going to see an exam question. I promise you this. You can mark my words. You're going to see an exam question, and they're going to say, Paul goes out and gets some, they may not use these words, but it's going to be like this, okay? The agent goes out, gets a listing with a seller, and then the agent leaves the company. What happens to the listing agreement? Nothing. It stays intact, because listing agreements and buyer agency agreements are always between the broker and the client, not the salesperson. Now, you're going to get that question right, okay? However, in this example, we have Mary, who took a buyer's agency agreement with some clients, and Paul, who took a listing agreement with a client, Tom. Now, here's where the complication really comes into play. In this example, let's just say that John and Carrie are looking at Paul's house that he has listed. So they're actually looking at Tom's house. Well, wait a minute. Mary has the buyer's agency and Paul has a seller's agency. And in the old days, when I did not have designated agency, this would create what we call, and I'll try to come up with a new color for us here. This would create what we call a dual agency. So in other words, Mary worked not only for John and Carrie, but worked for Tom. And Paul not only worked for Tom, but he would be considered an agent for John and Carrie, because they're both in the same company, and it's called disclosed dual agency if you do it correctly and you have everyone sign the agreements. Now, The problem was, this is just what I noticed, okay? The problem was, and just think about it, and just think about this situation. Mary has become pretty good friends with John and Carrie. I mean, they're talking, they get to know each other, they build a relationship. Maybe they go to church together. Maybe their kids play on the little league soccer, softball team, whatever situation. Mary knows John and Carrie, forms a relationship, and they're friends. Mary has no idea who Tom is. Paul does, because Paul and Tom are members of the Lions Club or the Rotary Club or the Elks Club, or they go to church together, or they bowl together, or they play golf together. But Paul and Tom are good friends. Paul doesn't know John and Carrie. He's never met them. Has no idea what they are. So Mary writes a contract with John and Carrie on Paul's listing that Tom owns. What do you think I noticed in my office? I noticed Mary and Paul doing this, because Mary was trying to get John and Carrie the best deal she could, and Paul's trying to get Tom the best deal. And so they're kind of butting heads, and I didn't mean to hit my mic there. I apologize. Now, if you're in disclosed dual agency, you really owe both parties. You need to treat them fairly, right? You can't disclose confidential information in a disclosed dual agency. So anything confidential, like how much, John and Carrie might pay for the house, Mary can't disclose that to Paul. If Paul knows how much Tom's willing to accept, he can't disclose that to Mary. They can't disclose confidential information, but they still have to kind of work together. And so it makes it really challenging, or I notice that in my office. So when we go back over here to this question for dual agency, and by the way, let's go back here. Why are they tricky? Well, dual agency, the same firm or agent, represents both sides. You can't give out confidential information. But with a designated agency, the firms assign agents to each side, and it can conflict with loyalty and confidentiality. So that's kind of the problem that we have there. However, with the designated agency, if I kind of employ designated agency, so if I say, okay, I don't want to do dual agency, I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm now going to do what's called designated agency. And in this case, I will, as Mayfield Real Estate Inc., designate, so I'm going to designate, and I'm a creative speller, Paul as the seller's agent, and I will designate, I'm going to Mary as the buyer's agent. And so the broker will be classified generally in this case as a dual agent. So I can't disclose any confidential information that I get in the situation with either party, okay? However, in this case, as designated agency, it really allows Mary to work for John and Carrie, and it allows Paul to work for Tom, and there's not a lot of problems there. Okay? Kind of complicated, but you got it, and I know you did. So good job on that. So we will scroll on down. What is a facilitator or a transaction broker? Well, it's a non-agent role helping complete a deal, and there's the key you need to know, without representing either party. So what is a facilitator or transaction broker? It's a non-agent role helping complete a deal without representing either party. As a transaction broker, the thing I always like to mention when I'm teaching continuing education courses is that you cannot advocate, give advice, or take sides, or kind of do anything that might represent one of the parties. You are a transactional broker. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, sometimes some people may not want you to be a disclosed dual agent. And rather than being a disclosed dual agent, in other words, I'm representing the buyer and I'm representing the seller. And so under the contract, I can convert from an agent from both of those people to just being a transactional broker. And in that case, I'm just being a facilitator and trying to negotiate a deal. I can't give any advice. I can't advocate. I can't, I'm just a neutral facilitator in that situation. Really can't, I can give you comparables of what's sold, but you have to interpret the data. And so a lot of times agents really want to work in a transactional brokerage situation, but they're actually giving too much advice and they're advocating. You can't do that, okay? So just understand that as well. What does an agency relationship, or when does an agency relationship automatically terminate? On expiration or when the contract is fulfilled? I actually looked at some questions today because I'm trying to go through and read questions a lot. I want to make sure that I'm understanding what I'm teaching, if there's a different angle I need to approach. And it was interesting, a question I read today talked about when would a listing agreement terminate, and actually it was fulfillment of the process. I mean, it closed. Okay, so if it expires or it's fulfilled, now you could add one other item there, and that would be what? If it's mutually agreed to end. So in other words, somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want out of my agreement." Yeah, that would terminate the agreement. When would be another time that we could terminate the agreement? And I'm going to add these to this. Well, the death of the broker or the death of the client. Now, remember, I just told you a minute ago, it will not terminate upon the death of the salesperson, because agency agreements are between the broker and the client. So we could add mutual agreement. Both parties mutually agree to terminate. And we could also add death of the broker or client. And I will add that to the flashcard, okay? Let's do one more and wrap it up for today. Do any fiduciary duties continue after the agency ends? Yes, like confidentiality may continue. Great question there, and you might see something like this, is that if you have a listing agreement on my home, so you've listed my home and you bring me a contract. Let's say I had my home listed for $500,000 and you bring me a contract for $475,000. And I accept it. I say, yeah, I'm thrilled to get $475,000. So I signed the contract and everything looks good. And then you call me up 2 days later and say, gosh, John, I feel terrible, but the buyers were denied funding. They can't get financing. So we got to put the house back on the market. I'm like, really? You should have known that before you brought me that contract. It happens, trust me. So now my house was pending in the multiple listing and on Zillow. Now it's active. Well, next week my listing expires. Okay, it doesn't sell. And I'm kind of mad at you because you brought me this deal and the buyers weren't qualified and got my hopes up. And I'm thinking, you were just trying to do something so I'd extend the listing with you. And I'm going to go down the street and list with another person. So our listing expires. I list it with a broker down the street, $500,000. Now you were my agent, right? We had an agency relationship. But now the listing's expired, that agency's terminated, and I've relisted with your competitor. So you and I have no, agent-client relationship. That's over. It's terminated. Contract expired. Now I have an agency agreement with your competitor. That's my agent, and I'm their client. And now you sign a buyer's agency agreement with a buyer. And they want to look at my house, which is now listed with your competitor. And you're thinking, man, let's see, 500,000 times X percent. And you're thinking, I could have made a lot of money. And now I'm only going to get a portion because I don't have it listed anymore. Well, sorry for you. But now you have a client relationship, an agency relationship with the buyer, fiduciary obligation, care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, disclosure. And your buyer says, I wonder if they'd take $475,000. Well, I've already accepted that when you had it listed. And so when we go back to this question, do any fiduciary duties continue after, get rid of that thing there, after the agency ends? Yes. Confidentiality may continue. And in Missouri, it does. And so the bottom line is you cannot disclose to your buyer client that I will take $475, okay? You kind of have to take that with you, that confidential information with you after the listing expires. Hey, I just want to remind you, we would love to have you as a student. If you have not decided to get your real estate license, we have some great 5-star reviews. And I also have some great products that I am including for all of my students. It's in your content library. If you're one of my students watching, just click on the content library. You do not pay $98 if you're a student. If you want this and you went to another school, you can get all this information, and it's only $98. I need to move over a little bit there for you. But Global Real Estate School students, it is included. And don't forget, if you need some help with coaching, I have 5 minutes to a great real estate, jumpstarting your real estate career. I have some special news I'll be bringing on that real soon. But a lot of great things at Global Real Estate School. I've got a whole support page. In fact, if you're not even one of our students, you can go to globalrealestateschoolsupport.com. globalrealestateschoolsupport.com. Have lots of definitions for not only the states, but the national. I've got videos there. You can find out more. You can get the application for any of the applications. So check that out. I think you'll find it very interesting. So Global Real Estate School Support. Global Real Estate School, if you want to get your real estate license, would love to have you as a student. Hey, don't forget, sign up with Global Real Estate School. Tell your friends. And as always, thanks for watching this video. Go out, make it a great day. Hope to do more live streaming. I've sold my house, so my wife and I are now in a condominium, and we're loving it. And I won't have to cut grass anymore and do all these other things I had to do before, so I have more time. This was the inaugural broadcast from my new office right here in my condo, so hope you enjoyed it. And as always, thanks for watching the video. Go out and have a great day.